You wake up, and the silence is louder than any argument you've ever had. No buzzing phone. No footsteps down the hall. No one calling your name, asking what you want for breakfast. Just you and the quiet pressing against your chest like a weight. This is the part no one talks about, the morning after the life you built disappears. The first morning where you're not a husband anymore, just a man alone.
And it hurts.
Not because someone left the bed, but because your sense of being needed left with them. You sit up. You check your phone out of habit. Nothing. No good morning. No missed calls. Not even spam. You're free now, but it feels less like freedom and more like floating in deep space. No direction, no gravity, no reason to land. And that ache in your chest, it's not for her. It's for the version of you that made sense when she was still around. Brother, if you've ever felt this strange, hollow, invisible pain, you're not weak. You're not broken. You're becoming. Before we continue, drop a comment below. I choose solitude over chasing. Let the world know you're not running. You're rebuilding. Now, let's talk about what happens when you don't fill the silence, but face it. 1. The space that builds you, there's a silence that only men who've loved deeply truly understand. It's not the silence of peace. It's the silence after someone stops saying your name. After the laughter disappears from the hallway. After the scent of her shampoo fades from your pillow. After her toothbrush is gone, and you still catch yourself reaching for it. You stand in the kitchen, not because you're hungry, but because it's the only room with a light on. You stare at the coffee machine, wondering why you even made 2 cups out of habit. Old rituals remain, but they echo now. They remind you of what's missing, not what's present. This is the space after marriage that no one warns you about. Everyone talks about the heartbreak, the lawyers, the paperwork, but no one prepares you for the emptiness. Not the kind where you cry and scream, but the quiet kind, where you sit alone with yourself, and there's no distractions strong enough to drown the ache. This space isn't loud. It's hollow, and that hollowness begins to whisper things like, "You're not good enough. You failed. You're not a man if you couldn't keep your family together." And those whispers become louder when you're alone at night. You don't just miss her. You miss the version of you that had a purpose, that felt needed, that felt chosen. You begin to question everything. Was it your fault? Were you too distant, too soft, too demanding? You try to replay memories like movies, but all the endings feel like reruns. You can't rewrite them. And here's the dangerous part. You start seeking noise, distractions, anything to avoid facing yourself in that mirror. You chase attention.
You swipe right.
You text people you don't even care about. You go out, not to have fun, but to feel wanted, even for a moment. Because the silence, it exposes what you've buried. The pain you never addressed. The anger you never released. The shame you never named. But let me tell you something few men ever hear. This space isn't your end. It's your crucible. Because in this void, you finally stop running. And when you stop running, you start rebuilding. Not from bitterness, but from truth. You begin to notice things. The way your breath slows when you stop checking your phone. The way your mind clears when you walk without headphones. The way your soul softens when you stop pretending you're okay. You cry in silence, and that's strength. You journal the thoughts you were too proud to say out loud, and that's growth. You lift weights, not to look good for her, but to reclaim the body that carries your story. You clean your space, not for guests, but because chaos outside mirrors chaos within. Slowly, you begin to feel something returning. Not hope, not yet, but awareness. Awareness that maybe, just maybe, this emptiness has something to teach you. Maybe it's stripping away the roles so you can meet the man underneath. Not the husband, not the provider, not the fixer, just the man. And maybe that man is worthy of being loved, even if no one's telling him that right now. This space is not your punishment. It's your permission. Permission to break. Permission to rebuild. Permission to become someone new. Not because someone else is watching, but because you're watching yourself. And that is when healing begins. Not when you forget her, but when you remember you, before her, beyond her, separate from her. Because one day, the silence won't hurt the same. One day, you'll drink coffee without expecting another mug. One day, the bed won't feel too big. It'll feel like your space again. And that's not loneliness. That's sovereignty. 2. The man she can't touch, she texts you again. Not because you chased, but because you didn't. Not because you begged, but because you vanished without bitterness. Without noise. Just gone calmly. And in a world full of men who can't stand silence, your absence becomes louder than any message. See, there's something magnetic about a man who doesn't react. A man who doesn't answer out of need, who doesn't perform to prove his worth, who simply holds his position. You've changed now. Not because you read a book, not because you learned a tactic, but because you lived through the fire and came out still breathing. You've sat with your loneliness. You didn't run from it. You made peace with it. And that peace, it built something inside you that no one can touch. You're no longer stirred by her stories. You don't flinch at her photos. You don't wonder who she's with because you've remembered who you are. And the truth? That unsettles her. Not because you're trying to manipulate her, but because you're no longer available for manipulation. You've become untouchable. Not cold. Not bitter. Just solid. The kind of man who no longer dances for validation. You don't try to be interesting. You are interested in your life, your growth, your mission. And that is why women who once had control now feel powerless around you. Because you've reclaimed your power by no longer placing it in their hands. You show up calm, not cold. Present, not needy. Decisive, not defensive. You're not scared of rejection, because rejection means nothing to a man who doesn't chase. You're not trying to win someone back. You're too busy winning yourself back. There's a stillness in you now, one that wasn't there before. And it radiates. It speaks louder than words. She notices you don't try to prove anything. She notices you don't flinch when she pulls back. She notices you don't care if she watches your stories or ignores you altogether. Because you no longer play games. You no longer entertain chaos. You protect your peace like a soldier protects his last piece of land. And that makes you different. Rare. Dangerously composed. Don't react. You respond. If it's worth your energy, you don't explain. You embody. You walk into a room, and something in your energy says, I know who I am, and I don't need anyone to tell me. That kind of presence, it can't be bought. It can't be faked. It has to be earned through pain, through loss, through silence. And now that you've earned it, you protect it. She may try to reach out, to check in, to re-enter softly, to test your temperature, but you don't entertain tests. You don't open doors that were once slammed in your face. Not out of anger, but out of clarity. Because once a man has learned to live without someone, he no longer needs to prove that he can. You've moved beyond her emotional reach. Not to hurt her, but to honor yourself. And maybe she'll never admit it, but deep down, she respects you more now than ever before. Because strength like yours can't be begged for. It can only be built. 3. You became the standard. Quietly, completely. You became the standard. Quietly, completely. Most men look back. You don't. Most men wonder if she's moved on. You've stopped caring. Not because you're numb, but because something deeper has awakened in you. Something she couldn't break. Something no one else can give or take away. You've become sovereign. You no longer orbit around her gravity. You've found your own center. And in doing so, you've become the kind of man who no longer seeks attention because your presence speaks louder than any pursuit. There was a time when silence hurt, when the absence of her voice felt like a scream. But you stayed in that silence long enough to understand. It wasn't her absence that broke you. It was your dependence on her presence. Now you sit in that same silence. And it no longer screams. It listens. It reflects. It sharpens you. You don't fill your days with noise anymore. You fill them with intention. Your mornings are not dictated by messages. They begin with stillness, coffee, a cold shower, a journal, and a question only you can answer. Who am I choosing to become today? This is the Stoic standard. Not perfection, not pride, but presence. A presence rooted in clarity, not confusion. In self-respect, not reaction. In sovereignty, not survival. You are no longer a man who begs to be chosen. You are the man who chooses carefully, quietly, with standards sharpened by pain. And here's the shift. You no longer fear rejection because rejection no longer defines you. You don't chase chemistry. You value compatibility. You don't ask, does she want me? You ask, does she even live by values I can respect? You've stopped explaining your silence. You've stopped apologizing for your distance because your time is no longer cheap. Your energy is not on discount, and your peace is not up for negotiation. She can call. She can text. She can post stories to stir you, but it doesn't work anymore because you don't seek chaos where you've already found peace. And peace is your new language. You speak fewer words, but each one cuts cleaner. You walk slower, but every step lands firmer. Your eyes don't wander. They observe. Your heart doesn't crave validation. It craves alignment. You don't rush into rooms to be seen. You enter slowly, and the room adjusts to your stillness. You used to wonder what she thought. Now you wonder if she even thinks deeply at all. Because here's what you've learned. It's not about who's watching you. It's about who's worth watching. And most aren't. You've become the man who guards his attention. Not because you're arrogant, but because you've paid the price of giving it away too freely. You've become the man who no longer opens old doors. Not out of spite, but because you've built better ones. You've become the man who'd rather walk alone with peace than walk with someone who disrupts it. You are slow to invite, quick to release, not because you're wounded, but because you've healed. And healing changed your appetite. You no longer hunger for approval. You hunger for discipline, for growth, for a connection that respects your depth, not just your image. You are not seduced by curves. You are moved by character. You don't pursue drama. You exit it. You don't prove your worth. You embody it. You don't fear being misunderstood. You fear betraying your own standards. You've become the storm. No longer afraid of silence, because you've found your voice inside of it. And now she feels the shift. Not because you shouted it, but because she can't reach you anymore. Not emotionally, not mentally, not spiritually. You've become untouchable. Not because you're hardened, but because you're whole. A man who doesn't need to be seen to be significant. A man who doesn't beg for love, because he already lives in self-respect. A man who doesn't chase, not because he's playing games, but because he finally knows what's worth chasing. And because of that, you've become the standard. Not by being perfect, but by being present, principled, and profoundly untethered. The world doesn't teach men this. It tells you to chase, to please, to prove. But the Stoic? He doesn't chase what runs. He doesn't cling to what fades. He doesn't fight for what costs him his soul. He stands. And in that stillness, he becomes everything she thought she wanted, but never had the patience to understand. You became the standard. Not loud, but present. Conclusion, unforgettable. And here's what most men never realize. Your value was never in being chosen. It was in choosing yourself, even when no one else did. You don't become a man of substance by being loud. You become him by being rooted in pain, in principle, in silence. And when you stop asking, will she come back, and start asking, who am I becoming without her? That's when the shift begins. You stop being a story in someone else's life. You become the author of your own. No longer waiting. No longer hoping. No longer chasing people who were never built to walk beside you in the first place. The man who walks alone with purpose is always stronger than the one surrounded by noise and emptiness.
You've paid your price in pain.
Now you live in clarity. And whether she understands it or not, whether anyone ever admits it or not, the world respects a man who doesn't chase what doesn't nourish him. If this message struck a chord in you, if somewhere in this silence you saw a reflection of yourself, then leave a comment below. I don't chase. I choose. Because every man who chooses himself gives another man permission to do the same. Like this video, subscribe to the Stoic Spirit, and share this message with a brother who needs to hear it. Not for views, not for vanity, but because one day that silence will visit another man's life, and he'll need the strength you just found today.